My name is Joe Prony, and this is the Rise Above Project. And before we start the show today, I want to show you my new background, and look at that. So with that, the background is an actual picture of Lola, and a company was able to take that picture and make a blanket out of it. So I'm going to use it as my background. Look, you can even see her tongue. Anyway, for today's show, we're going to talk about the TLC 6-step depression cure. Now, most people think when they hear the letters TLC, they think it's tender loving care. But in our case for today, it stands for therapeutic lifestyle change. Now, much of the information that I got for today's show was from a Dr. Stephen Alardi. He's a professor at Kansas State University. And he wrote a book on this called The Depression Cure. And I read it probably about 10 years ago, and I really liked it. And some of the information for today's been updated, but I really like his take on the whole subject. So let's talk about depression. Depression is the #1 cause of disability for those between 15 to 44 years old. It affects over 16 million Americans in the United States. And depression has risen from 11% to over 21% in college students, just going from the years 2013 to 2018. So it's much worse now. Now, the use of antidepressant medication has soared since the early 2000s. So now we already have a little bit of an interesting problem here. Because if we believe that antidepressant medication is the quote-unquote cure for depression, then why is it that the amount of medication has been soaring since the 2000s? And also, the amount of depression has been soaring and is still soaring since the 2000s. So we have an issue here. Does the medication actually work? Is it that big pharma is just pushing off medication, and medication may not be the best way to handle depression? So we have a question right off the bat, straight question. Are antidepressant medications the best way to treat depression? I think we could say probably not, just from looking at a little bit of information. Number 2, is depression caused by a chemical imbalance? Because a lot of people say that. Or, let's change the question. Is depression actually a symptom of a chemical imbalance? And chemicals, we're talking about serotonin and dopamine. So what if the answer is yes, that depression is supposedly caused by a chemical imbalance? How do we know this? We should be able to have a test, and we can look at the test and say, yes, here's an imbalance, here's the depression, let's prescribe this drug, cure the problem. But here's the other issue. There is no test to determine if there's a chemical imbalance in human beings. There is no standard of what serotonin or dopamine should be in each individual human being. So the answer is, we don't know. So when we say that it's due to a chemical imbalance, we don't know that for sure. We can also ask the question, are we the ones causing the chemical imbalance in the first place? Because maybe it's just a symptom. Because we can change the chemicals in our brains, and we can do it in a negative way. For example, if you have a lot of, say, emotional trauma that has not been resolved, it's going to change your neurochemicals. If you have, say, negative, distorted thinking, that with no gratitude and you look at the world as an evil, harmful place, that's going to change the neurochemicals in your brain. What if you have poor lifestyle choices? And we'll go over those in a little bit. Will that change the neurochemicals in your brain? Of course. Is it going to change it in a good way? Absolutely not. So we have to take a look at what we are doing as human beings. Are we creating our own depression? So let's look at it from the other side. Is there something that we can do to positively enhance the chemicals in our brain? And the answer to that seems to be yes. Number one, we can manage and resolve our traumas. Number two, we can sharpen our thinking, not to always think in a negative way. We can look more for gratitude and look more for solutions in our life and take control. And that will also help us. Number three, improve our lifestyle. Eat correctly, get some sleep, cultivate meaningful relationships. Will these enhance the chemicals in your brain? Absolutely. Does it do it better than medication? We're going to answer that in just a little bit. So Steve Ilardi, who I've been referencing during this show, he says that depression is a disease of civilization. And he says it in a really nice way. And I actually agree with him on that. But I would have to add a couple of things. I also think depression is a disease of laziness. Now, you could say it this way. Are depressed people, do they become lazy? Or do lazy people who are not engaged with the world become depressed? And I think the answer to that is we don't know for sure, but there's just as much evidence to believe that if you are basically a lazy human being, emotionally, mentally, and physically, it's going to cause depression just as well. I can also say it's a disease of not having meaning and purpose in your life. Because think of it like this. Of how many people in the world have meaning and purpose in their life, and they have drive to get out there and do things and accomplish goals? It's hard to imagine them being in a dark place that's depressed, right? So again, I believe Dr. Ilardi is correct. It's a disease of civilization for a lot of reasons, but I also think it's just a disease of our own minds, not wanting to get out there and push ourselves to be better people. So let's take a look at the 6 steps. So number 1, and all these steps are very easy, by the way. There's a lot of cognitive ways that we can handle this that you have to get very deep into psychology to do. But we're not going to do that. We're going to take the easiest route here for today's show. So number 1, brain food. We can eat foods that have omega-3 fatty acids, which will decrease depression. Where can you find omega-3 fatty acids? You can find them in fish, walnuts, flax seeds. You can supplement. And that's just the basics, basic brain food. But overall, we also want to eat lean meats. We want to have fruits, vegetables, and grains. This is so easy. Everybody knows this. But why do people have difficulty putting it into practice? Because they'd rather just take a pill and they think that that helps. Just start off with eating well. That's number 1. Number 2, we can end ruminations. Now, what are ruminations? It's when people brood all the time. They have never-ending victim talk with no thought of a solution. You know, they look at the world as a bunch of problems. They look at the future and they say, well, things can't get better. Things are bad. And they tend to think about this over and over and over again. And then they whip themselves into this frenzy of negativity, which of course leads to what? It leads to depression. Now, we could get into the psychological ways of how to decrease that, but let's not do that today. Let's just try to move forward through it. And one of the ways we can do that is to just become more engaged in the world. And someone's going to say, well, what are you talking about? Well, I hear a lot of people and they'll say, oh, I'm so bored. Life is boring. The truth of the matter is that it's a big, massive, incredibly exciting world out there. So if you're telling me that you're bored, it means that, unfortunately, that you are a boring person. There's a lot of things out there to find excitement in. So just for fun, let's go over some of them. You can read a book. I remember being a little kid, and I was between 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. We're in grade school. And every summer, I was in the book club. And I think I read 20 to 25 books every summer. You know, I mean, it helped that I lived next to a library. But that's not the point. The point is that my goal at some point was to try to read every book in the library. I wanted to be smart with everything. So boredom, I don't even understand that. You can write. Learn how to write your own stories. Write a journal, write about yourself, write about things you don't know about, write about things you do know about. There's plenty of things to write about. Listen to music. There's a ton of great music out there. If you don't like that, learn how to play an instrument. That's another whole new world that's open to you that you can do. Have a conversation with someone who you can go back and forth with. Don't ruminate with them. Don't talk about how the world sucks. Just have a good conversation. I remember this way back when, to go along with Dr. Lardy saying that it's a disease of civilization. I think it's true. Way back when, we used to sit around as friends, even when we were little kids, and we could talk all day long. We even have these games, like truth or dare kind of thing. And I always liked truth, because you could always ask somebody a pretty deep question. And I think that was like the first start of me wanting to be a therapist way back when. But I always thought it was interesting to have deep conversations with people, even when I was only like 8, 9, 10 years old. Again, cultivate meaningful relationships and conversations and connections. It's very important. Educate yourself at any moment that you can. Think about this, just as some ideas. Did you know that there's over 200 species of blind cavefish? Now, you could spend probably the rest of your life just studying blind cavefish. There's so many species. And who would have known? Again, massive world out there. Don't tell me that you can't get engaged in this world. Here's something that's interesting. Did you know that if there's a tree in a forest and somebody chops down that tree and it's just a stump and it can't feed itself because it has no leaves, did you know that the other trees in that forest can funnel and divert their water from their root systems to that stump to help keep it alive? Think about that. There's a consciousness there that the other trees say, I don't know if they say, there's my friend who got hurt, but there's something about nature that will come together and will try to keep that stump alive. And they do. So there is a conscious effort from trees to keep their friends alive, which I think is totally interesting. So if you look at the world as a boring place, you need to get engaged a lot more. There's a lot out there. Let's take a look at something that has some practicality. Let's look at the stock market. If you want to make extra money, everybody wants money, right? And you're saying, well, how can I save money for the future with my job? I don't make enough money. Well, if you can save a little bit of money, you don't have to worry about your job making you that much money for your retirement. Why don't you put your money into a massive company and let them work for you? There's companies out there like Disney, Coca-Cola, banking companies that will always probably be more successful than you. So ride on their coattails. Toss them a little bit of money and have that money and give it to them and let them work for you. Learn how the stock market works. These are just little ideas. There's millions of them. The bottom line is, get engaged with the world. Don't sit there and ruminate about how the world sucks. All right, let's move on. Number 3, very easy. Therapeutic lifestyle change. These are the simplest 6 steps ever. Get some sunlight. Why? Because not enough sunlight causes the circadian rhythm to malfunction. And what does that mean? It means that it causes a disturbance in sleep, in your energy, in your appetite, and throws off your hormonal levels. What does that do? It causes depression. So again, it's pretty easy. Get some sunlight. Again, disease of civilization. When I was young, my mother would throw me out of the house. And it's pretty normal. Most kids had, their parents throw them out of the house and say, listen, don't come back until about 6 o'clock, when the street lamps come on. What is it? They throw them in a room and they sit there and watch a computer all day by themselves, like a vegetable. Of course they're going to be depressed, Then the kids will tell you, oh, I want to be in front of the computer. No, you don't. You just don't know anything else. So again, get some sunlight, get out in the real world, have fun. I live in a cul-de-sac, and where I'm at, I never see kids outside anymore. It's terrible. I know there are kids, but I don't see them. When I was younger, it was simple to find 15 to 20 kids in the neighborhood that wanted to have a quick game of hockey or basketball or whatever you wanted to do. These days, I don't see it. They're all locked up like a bunch of veal. Again, does that cause depression? Absolutely yes. Let's move on. Number 4, another easy one, proper sleep. What does proper sleep mean? You think you could get this right. It's sleep. In other words, when you go to sleep at night, it shouldn't be that you just fall asleep wherever you are, whenever you just kind of get tired. It should be a conscious effort. You should be going to bed and waking up basically at the same time every day. And your bedroom and your bed shouldn't be there just so you're hanging out and you're sitting there on your laptop. Beds are for only 2 things. Number 1, sex, and then after sex, sleep. That's it. That's all you need to know about that. You should be going to bed every night with a tired body and a clear mind. Basic stuff, very simple, and that will be part of the depression cure. Number 5 on our list, and I've talked about this a little bit already. You want to improve your social connection and social interactions. Here are some of the benefits. Decreases depression. You don't need to know more than that, but I'll give you more. It decreases your chance of dementia as you get older. It promotes safety. It promotes a sense of love and promotes a sense of belonging, which we all need, even if we think we don't. On the flip side of that, social isolation is considered to be torture and is associated with physical and psychological disintegration. That is so important, it deserves to be said again, just so people really get it. Again, social isolation is a form of torture, right? And what you can expect after that is physical and psychological disintegration. Why is that so important? Why do I say it twice? Because in our disease of civilization, I see people being socially isolated all the time. It's part of your lifestyle now. You ask kids, do you have conversations at school with the other kids? No. I don't get it. Do you play with other kids or hang out with other kids after school? No. Do I see parents and kids hanging out doing things anymore? Where I used to live when we were poor, you go to the park and there's a ton of families hanging out with their kids. Do I see that anymore? No. Do we still have parks? Yes. So all of these things you can do. Why we're not doing it anymore, I'll never understand, because we've become this real lazy, computerized, robotic world, much to our detriment. So here's the question. Do video games cause social isolation? Now, at first glance, you might say yes, right? Because video games, by today's standards, people are isolated. That's all they want to do, play video games. They're sitting there by themselves. But I don't think it is. I think it contributes, but I think it's more of a symptom of a very disengaged society. Again, not to play the part of the old guy again, but listen, video games have been around for a long time. And my friends and I played video games all the time. I didn't so much because you needed a bunch of quarters to play. But we would go to a bowling alley and there would be like arcades. There'd be a ton of video games to play. And there would be 5, 10, 15, 20 people at a time playing video games out in out with other people, having fun, enjoying each other, getting something to eat, getting something to drink, playing video games, laughing at each other. There was multiple places, by our high school when we were younger, pizza parlors and stuff. They had video games too. Everybody would line up with their quarters down and everybody would play and it would be fun and people would be cheering for other people and making fun of other people. It was a very social type of event. So do video games cause people to be socially isolated? No, it's the people that do it. You can take a good thing and say, okay, video games are kind of fun now and then, but why do you take it and make it an isolated thing? You don't have to do that. It could be a fun thing to do. I remember before school, there would be sometimes 50 people hanging out with each other, just in listening to music. I don't see that. It's funny when I drive around town sometimes and I see these kids waiting to go to school, they're all like separated. They do this social distancing. You don't have to tell them to do it. They're already doing it. And they listen to music on their headphones as individuals. Music is meant to be communal. It's like you get like 10 people sitting there listening to the same song, enjoying it, feeling it, dancing. You know, now it's all these kids, these brooding, they got their face down, they're angry, they're annoyed. Typically they're, you know, they got these sad faces, they're overweight, you know. It's like, come on, it's not their fault either. You know, you got to look at society and you got to look at their parents. Number 6 on our list, in our therapeutic lifestyle change. You knew this was coming. Exercise. So let's compare this. Okay, so if we have exercise on one side and we have antidepressant medication on the other, who wins in a head-to-head battle? At the very minimal, all you need to do is do cardiovascular activity, 30 minutes, 3 times a week, which is barely nothing. And put that up against the drug, you know what wins? Cardiovascular activity wins. It wins in the short term, but it also wins in the long term. Because what happens when you start to actually work out, you start to feel good about yourself. You improve your self-esteem. It improves your body, it improves your mind, it has anti-aging properties, and it promotes meaning and purpose. And it connects you to the world as well, because you're going to be happier. And over time, if you take a person who's using medication in order to knock down the symptoms of depression, you're not letting them build up their own strengths. So they're going to have to be on drugs probably forever. You know, it's not like, okay, we're good for 3 weeks, you know, and then all of a sudden you're going to become this happy person. It's not true. You're only mildly changed, maybe, while you're on the drug. You pull the drug and all of a sudden you got nothing. So again, why would you do that? Like, it makes no sense. So going back to the beginning, let's put all this together. The therapeutic lifestyle change in one day. So you wake up at the same time pretty much every day. Eat a healthy breakfast with your family. That's another thing people aren't doing today. Everybody's just grabbing food, doing whatever they want. You know, whatever happened that we sit down for breakfast or dinner with our families. That's changed too, you know, at the detriment of our mental health. So you can change that. Engage in physical activity during the day. Talk with friends. Go outside. Walk your dog. Not only do you have connection there, but you have exercise, you're outside, and your dog's going to get in shape too. So it's like a 4-for-1 just to do that. Educate yourself. Like I said, there's a million things out there to educate yourself with. Listen to music. Have sex. Go to bed. Go to bed tired with a clear mind at the same time, pretty much every day. And that's really it. So that's the show for today. I hope you found it valuable. And one more time, there's my new background. That's Lola. Thanks for listening. That was the Therapeutic Lifestyle Change Depression Cure in only 6 steps. Thank you.